Talking about the Lewis County proposed budget, Tim Hunt is here. He's the county manager for Lewis County and just announced this proposed budget, your first one. Yes. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And good to see you. Thanks for coming in. A lot to talk about, and there's some devil in the details, and that's why we're taking this moment here at our digital news desk to kind of get into this, and we'll put information up on the screen. But overall, your budget is about $62 million. Yes. It's spending about $1.5 million more than what it did last year. Yes. Your taxes for property owners will be relatively the same.
Yes.
And all those things seem to add up to be okay for you. I mean, you had a favorable response from your board this week.
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit more difficult budget year because we haven't seen a significant increase in sales tax, which we have the last 3 or 4 years. After COVID, we started to see sales tax rise fairly quickly. That is not the case now, so that is leveled off. And we've also had a fairly large increase in labor expenses because the cost of living has gone up in the last 3 or 4 years, and the contracts have caught up to that. So you've got rising labor costs, and you've got a stagnant sales tax, which means we got to shift some of that to the taxpayers, right? And we didn't want to do that. We want to be very conscious and very careful about what we do because a lot of people are on fixed incomes and they just can't afford to stay in their homes if we do that. So we did a lot of work on the budget. We made a lot of hard decisions. We didn't cut anything, but we didn't grow anything. We held firm, and we used a little more of some different revenue sources to try to get to make sure that our tax rate stayed the same.
Interesting on sales tax because you have marshals now in Lowville. I would have expected maybe a little bit more of a residual effect there, maybe more cash coming in. What happened?
I think we did see that. Okay. So clothing sales in sales tax wasn't not on the radar in Lewis County at all, and this year it climbed to about 8% of our sales tax revenue. So we do think that was from marshals. So yeah, every one of those things help. Vehicle sales tax comes back to the county you register the vehicle in. But the thing with sales tax is it's very fickle related to the economy. So if the economy starts to dip a little bit, people don't go out and buy a new car. They don't buy as much construction materials, for example. They're not building a new house. You'll start to see sales tax come down.
All right, so I have a guess as to where it may have taken a hit. Was it the weather? Was it because there wasn't as much snow and not as many snowmobilers going out?
Yeah,
gas,
absolutely.
That's a big one for you guys. Gasoline tax, right? Yep. And then going out to the local establishments to have food.
Right. And it hasn't gone down; it stayed flat.
Okay.
But New York State as a whole is predicting that they do not predict sales tax to climb this year. And a lot of that is just trying to predict, is our economy going to grow rapidly or is it going to kind of just hum along? And I think the consensus is don't count on it growing. So we had to budget sales taxes if it's not going to grow.
And your idea to get more sales tax in that kind of environment is just simply luring more businesses in.
Absolutely. We have to, every retail business is helpful. Also, tourism is helpful. The snowmobile economy, like you said, the ATV economy, all of those folks going to restaurants, buying food, filling up their cars with gas, that is all very helpful. And the reason it's so important to our economy in Lewis County is you look at our budget, $62 million, a third of that is paid for through what we would consider revenue streams inside of our departments. And most of that is supplied by the state of New York or federal government. Then another third of that is paid for by sales tax. And everything that we can't pay for with those two revenue streams ends up going onto the property taxes. And the more sales tax we generate, the less we have to put on property taxes. And that's healthy and helpful. So that's why I think it's so important for our economy to be growing and healthy.
All right, so now let's get into the details, and it gets kind of murky here, so you need to follow along, and we're going to put information up on the screen because we've said that the tax for Lewis County is $6.31 per $1,000 of assessed value.
Yeah.
You have that $100,000 home, your tax bill is $630.
Yes.
When you open up that tax bill, everyone's not going to see that $6.31.
Absolutely not.
They're going to see some different numbers, and this is because not every town, you have to go town by town in Lewis County, and when you go Denmark, Diana, Gregg, Harrisburg, Lewis, Leiden, all of them, when you do that, you have to look at if the town has done a reval, a reassessment of the properties.
Yes.
And property values, and you've shown this in your budget report, they've increased in the county, right?
They've increased to $242 million.
And so property values are just better. They've gone up
Yes.
post-COVID. People have bought second places, camps or whatever. And so just in general, the property values have gone up. Some towns have done that revaluation, the reassessment. Other towns have not for years.
Yes, for years.
And that's relevant in this budget. And this happens not just in Lewis County. This is this can happen in any county. But your message in your budget presentation is that you need more towns to do their revaluation.
Yes.
So I'll start here, and it gets murky, but why is it important for towns to keep up the pace with how much properties are really worth, instead of not doing that reval and letting someone really have a low value on their home? Why is that important?
So when we tax people off of property values, the constant message has to be fairness, right? We want everyone to pay their fair share of taxes. We don't want people to overpay, and we don't want people to underpay. That is dependent upon the value of their property. And one of the things that happens is that can get out of whack very easily. So if I buy a house and that house is assessed at $200,000, the following year it may still only be $200,000 in value, but the next year it may be $250,000. It just depends on what the real estate market is doing. Well, we know in the last 3 years, all real estate values have risen fairly rapidly as people have left the city and can, quite frankly, work on Zoom or a Teams meeting and love the North Country. And that's great for our economy. But as that's happening, you have people that have lived here their entire lives and their house hasn't changed. So things start to get a little out of whack. And what we want to do is make sure that that doesn't happen so that everyone pays the right amount based on the value of their home.
So if in a town, whatever the town is, if I've had a house there and it's worth $200,000 and I don't make any improvements, and you come in and you have your home and you put on an extra wing or whatever you do, and you make some really major improvements, and your home should be twice the amount of mine.
Correct.
But if that reval doesn't happen, and you're talking about fairness,
Yes.
your larger home, which
Yep.
which is extravagant compared to mine, are being taxed at the same level. We are paying the same amount of tax, but your home is worth more,
Right.
and I'm the one that's getting screwed.
Yes. Yes. Well, reevaluation is really all about making sure that the right people are paying the taxes. And generally, the people who get taken advantage of if they don't do reevaluation are the people who are least able to afford it, right? I haven't done anything. I'm a senior citizen. I'm living in my home. I've been there for 40 years. I haven't done anything, and they haven't done a reevaluation. So the 5 houses in my neighborhood that have put on additions and done all of these extravagant things are still assessed the same as mine. I'm essentially asking that person to overpay. And so by doing a reevaluation of all the properties, you are making sure the right people pay. And you see a benefit in that, because if you don't do that, what happens is the state comes up with what's called an equalization rate, and that applies equally to everybody in that community when it should be more individualized and targeted to each individual home.
So back to that example of where we said the tax rate for the county is $6.31. If you're in the town of Croghan and you open up your tax bill and you see how much it is per thousand, you're not going to see $6.31. And that's because the town of Croghan hasn't done an assessment in a few years. So I'll put some numbers up on the screen. The first one is the rate change including equalization. So if you look at this and you look at the town of Croghan and you go across and you see the 2025 rate, it's going to be 13. So if I'm in the town of Croghan, I open up my tax bill for the county. It's not $6.31. It's $13.56.
Yes.
And that's because this next graphic shows that they haven't done a reval, and that the homes in the town of Croghan are actually about 46% of their fair value. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And that's because Croghan hasn't done
the reevaluation of property. So 50% value, or 46% roughly. So that would literally be, I bought a house for $100,000. Now it's worth $200,000, but my assessment is still at $100,000. And that's what I'm paying taxes on. So the state has come in and said, no, there's a 46% equalization rate because you have not reassessed your properties. So their tax rate is almost double what someone else's would. Now, the amount they pay in taxes is going to be pretty similar. It's just
to everybody, to the county.
Yep, to everyone in the county.
Because of this formula.
Yes, because of the formula.
But what it is on the town level is the fact that if we're in the town of Croghan, and let's switch it around, you've been there for decades and you have that $200,000 home. I come in from the city and I make huge improvements to a home, and I'm at $400,000.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, because we haven't had that revaluation, I'm paying the same amount of taxes that you are, and you should be over there jumping up and down and saying, hey, wait a minute, no, your house is much more. You should be paying your fair share of taxes.
Paying more.
So a revaluation would help balance what you're saying, balance it out so that the people that should be paying more in taxes because they have higher values in properties, that reval would have that happen. Why aren't the revals happening? I'm not just picking on the town of Croghan.
No,
I just want to be clear,
so
because
one
you
of
have
the,
Croghan, I just want to call them a few of them. You have Croghan, Denmark is at 80%, Greg is 70%. This isn't just the town of Croghan. It just happens to be, it's the first one on the list in an alphabetical order. So some of these towns don't have assessors, or it's too much of a work to get it done. How's it work?
There's a number of reasons why that happens. One, assessors are very hard to hire. It's a specialty. You have to understand home values. There's a lot of math and coming up with a formula for evaluations, and they're hard to get. So the towns are struggling, one, to keep good assessors. And when they do get one, they usually have 5 or 6 towns or 10 towns, so they can't really be on top of it all the time. The other reason is, even if nothing's ever happened to my home, right? I have a house that's a $150,000 house. I haven't done any additions. I haven't done anything, but I'm getting older, and I know that the market's changed, and my $150,000 home probably will sell for $170,000. So when they do the reval, my property values are going to go up by $20,000, and I'm going to pay a little bit more in tax. So people go, no, don't do it, don't do it. They think they're saving money, but what's happening is my property is going up $20,000 in value when my next door neighbors maybe went up $200,000 in value. And so by doing the reval, yes, your values are going to go up a little bit, and you might pay a little bit more taxes, but the person next to you is going to pay a lot more in taxes, and that's helpful, right? So the community generally puts pressure on the town boards not to do revals because everyone thinks it's going to hurt them equally, and it does not. Does that?
Yeah, oh yeah, totally. No, I understand it. And in the big picture, when all of that money for the county comes into the county, and all of a sudden the amount of tax that you can get from property taxes, the tax base grows.
Yes.
That is more revenue for the county, and actually could turn around to where your taxes go down on the big picture.
Yes.
Because there just happens to be more pie.
Correct. And that's one of the things that, and sometimes, you know, the residents think, well, the pie's getting bigger and you're just going to take more. And sometimes that does happen. We try not to do that. As the pie gets bigger, you want to take less. And if you look at that one graphic that shows our tax rate is at $6.31. It was that 20 years ago. So we're not taking more of the pie. We're keeping our tax rate the same, but because the pie's grown, we haven't had to raise the tax rate. So that's the idea is you want to grow your pie, keep that tax rate equal or, you know, low, and then make sure that it's being distributed evenly throughout the communities. The equalization rate is an attempt to do that, but it's kind of a broad brush, and it's not fair. It's not 100% fair like a good reevaluation is.
I feel good with the explanation. I get it, and I think that we explained it pretty well. I hope that that's valuable to people to understand in Lewis County. And again, it happens in every county. There are towns where you don't have that reval, and it can have that effect. The last thing I want to talk about is the town of Lewis, because that's got something else going on.
Yes.
The town of Lewis, people there are going to see tax bills that will be more, right?
Yes.
And it's because there's a dam in the town of Lewis that supplies the water for the city of Rome.
Correct.
And the city of Rome said, wait a minute, we should not be assessed at $10 million. And they took Lewis County to court.
Yes.
And you didn't win.
And we didn't win.
And what happened?
And they didn't take, they basically said there is no taxable value to this water supply, this source of water for the city of Rome. Well, what it did is it dropped the assessed value in that town by $10 million. If you have your town budget, your county budget, or your school budget, and you distribute the cost across the tax base shrunk by $10 million. So the amount that the people who are still there have to pay goes up. And it's unfortunate and it's very painful. And we're all cognizant of it, and we're trying. And one of the reasons why we prefer to put government operations on sales tax and other forms of revenue is because we know what can happen in those situations. That's a really dramatic and unfortunate situation in a town that really is going to struggle to deal with that.
Yeah. Any idea of what the tax bills have gone up, whether it's the school, whether it's the county? Any idea what some of them have gone up now?
I don't.
That's a big number, $10 million to disappear.
Yes.
And then the rest of this. So now the rest of the town has to, all that they have to absorb it. It goes on the shoulders of those taxpayers.
Yeah.
Any appeals on that in the court system? Don't know?
I don't believe that there is one. Tax certiorari cases are pretty complicated, and there usually isn't an appeal process to them. So I do think they're looking at possibly doing a reevaluation of all their properties to try to make sure that it's distributed. And it's going to be a shock to the system when you lose that kind of value. Fortunately, for the rest of the county, they're not losing value, they're adding value.
Right.
There's a lot of second homes, camps, things like that have really added a lot of value.
So when you talk to the town leaders and they haven't done a reval in a while, what's your message to them?
I think, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. I know that they're all very well aware of it and they're all doing their best. And some of it is just the amount of resources they have to do the reevaluation. There are some that are on a state program where if you reassess a certain percentage of the properties in your town every year and you keep your evaluation, the equalization rate will stay within 10%. So, it'll always be within 90%. And the state really encourages that program so you don't have this kind of big shock. So it requires a lot more work, though, because you're kind of doing the reval all the time. And that's the best way to go.
Tim, good to see you. Thanks for coming in and explaining it. And I think it's good for people to,
Thank you, Jeff.
if you have to go back and replay it, you can do that. Go back and
Thank you.
A lot of words out of this, reval, reassessment, and equalization. It's confusing, but it's important for people to realize the way that budgets are put together and why you open it up and you may have a different number than what the news puts out or what you put out.
Exactly.
It's because of the value of your home and if it has been reassessed.
Yeah, and I opened this up yesterday for the legislators, and it's really out of our control, but it's an important conversation because you want the legislators to understand the impacts to their local residents.
Sure, they'll get the phone calls.
Yeah, they're the ones going to get the phone calls, and we are so conscious of trying to protect people's ability to stay in their homes, and we do everything we can to make sure that rate stays in a good place.
All right. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
Good.